Okay, hi AP scholars. I am going to walk through another passage with you. This is an AP language passage. Um, so what we'll do is we'll read through the prompt, then we'll read through the passage itself, and then I will show you how I would go about writing an introduction, focusing particularly on the thesis statement, and then outline where I would go from there. Okay. If you don't have this handy that I put on Canvas for you, you might want to have it handy. And also remember that the example that I gave you said make sure that you read the prompt carefully because there, generally speaking, happens to be a lot of introductory information in the prompt that will help you to understand where the speaker is coming from. So this is definitely one of those prompts where it will give you some insight to the speaker. Okay, so it says, the passage below is the opening to a speech made in 1960 by American journalist and politician Clare Boothe Luce to journalists at the Women's National Press Club. In this speech, Luce went on to criticize the tendency of the American press to sacrifice journalistic integrity in favor of the perceived public demand for sensationalist stories. So, before we even read what we're looking to analyze, let's point out a couple of things. First, she's a journalist. She's also a politician. They asked her to give a speech to the Women's National Press Club. So if you look at the audience to whom she's speaking, the intended audience is a group of journalists just like her. So she's speaking to people who understand the craft of journalism, understand the rigors of journalism. Let's go back here. She has been asked to speak, but she's going to criticize them for tending to print sensationalist stories more so than stories that have journalistic integrity. So in this introduction, she's kind of easing them in before she lowers the boom on them with, you guys need to do your job better. Okay? So keep all of those things in mind. Okay, she is a journalist. That's important to note. Okay, so our task says, then in a well-developed essay, analyze how, that's definitely italicized, how Luce uses this introduction to prepare the audience for her message. Support your analysis of her rhetoric with specific references to the text. Okay, so our job is to analyze how she uses this introduction to prepare her audience to hear some criticism from her. Okay, and here's the passage. I am happy and flattered to be a guest of honor on this always exciting and challenging occasion. But looking over this audience tonight, I am less happy than you might think and more challenged than you could know. I stand here at this rostrum invited to throw rocks at you. You have asked me to tell you what's wrong with you, the American press. The subject not only is of great national significance, but also has, one should say, infinite possibilities and infinite perils to the rock thrower. For the banquet speaker who criticizes the weaknesses and pretensions or exposes the follies and sins of his listeners, even at their invitation, it does not generally evoke an enthusiastic, no less a friendly, response. The delicate art of giving an audience hell is always one best left to Billy Graham's and Bishop Sheen's. Now, if you look, there's an asterisk that lets you know Billy Graham is an American Christian evangelist, and Fulton John Sheen, an American Catholic archbishop. Both became renowned for their religious oratory. Their speeches are widely broadcast on radio and television. So if you didn't know that reference, that helps. Okay, I'm going to continue. But you are an audience of journalists. There is no audience anywhere who should be more bored, indeed more revolted, by a speaker who tried to fawn it on, butter it up, exaggerate its virtues, play down its faults, and who would more quickly see through any attempt to do so. I ask you only to remember that I am not a volunteer for this subject tonight. You asked for it. For what is good journalism all about? On a working, finite level, it is the effort to achieve illuminating candor in print and to strip away cant. It is the effort to do this not only in matters of state, diplomacy, and politics, but also in every smaller aspect of life that touches the public interest or engages proper public curiosity. It is the effort to explain everything from a summit conference to why the moon looks larger coming over the horizon than it does when it has fully risen in the heavens. It is the effort, too, to describe the lives of men and women, big and small, close at hand or thousands of miles away, familiar in their behavior or unfamiliar in their idiosyncrasies. It is, to use the big word, the pursuit of and the effort to state the truth. No audience knows better than an audience of journalists that the pursuit of the truth and the articulation of it is the most delicate, hazardous, exacting, and inexact of tasks. Consequently, no audience is more forgiving, I hope, to the speaker who fails or stumbles in his own pursuit of it. The only failure this audience could never excuse in any speaker would be the failure to try to tell the truth as he sees it about his subject. In my perilous but earnest effort to do so here tonight, I must begin by saying that if there is much that is wrong with the American press, there is also much that is right with it. I know, then, that you will bear with me, much as it may go against your professional grain, if I ask you to accept some of the good with the bad, even though it may not make such good copy for your newspapers. For the plain fact is that the U.S. daily press today is not inspiringly good. It is just far and away the best press in the world. Okay, so if we are looking, I put here what our task is. Our task is to analyze how Luce uses this introduction to prepare the audience for her message, right? So a few things that I noticed. She tended to use, you could say she used repetition, because she kept reminding, let me change the font size here. She kept reminding the audience, like, remember, you asked me to do this. This was not my idea, this was your idea. Repetition. Oh. Okay. She definitely used, I would say, ethos, as in she played on the idea that all were journalists, right? Exaggerated praise, especially at the end. She wants them to know remind them that their job is a noble job, that what they have signed up to do is in fact a very important job, and getting at the truth is a very important task. Okay, so I would say for my thesis, Luce uses the introduction to her speech to prepare her audience for her message by reminding them that she is there at their request repeatedly. So it's the whole idea of repetition. By to their ethos of becoming journalists in the first place, and through exaggerated praise for what the U.S. press corps is, press is capable of doing when the job is done well. Okay, so there's my thesis. Okay, so what I did is I picked out the 3 things that I decided I could speak about somewhat intelligently, and then crafted them into what I'm being asked to do. I'm being asked to analyze how the introduction is preparing the audience for her message. Okay, for her, I'm going to put seemingly harsh message, or seemingly critical. Okay, so then after I have my thesis, what I'm going to do is add an introduction. Clare Boothe Luce, journalist and politician. Seems to have harsh words for her fellow journalists. She gives a controversial and condemning speech regarding the job of the press itself. Luce eases her audience into this into this speech. Well, I wouldn't need to say that. I could say, let's see if that reads well. Clare Boothe Luce, a journalist and politician, seems to have harsh words for her fellow journalists. She gives a controversial and condemning speech regarding the job of the press itself. Luce uses the introduction to her speech to prepare her audience for her seemingly critical message by repeatedly reminding them that she is there at their request. I would maybe underline that, because you're going to be typing, you can italicize things, so that would be a good idea. By appealing to their ethos of becoming journalists in the first place, and through exaggerated praise for what the U.S. press is capable of doing when the job is done well. Okay. You know, the other thing that I thought about here, she's kind of self-deprecating. In fact, maybe I like that better than I'll just put, by employing a self-deprecating tone. I need to make that parallel, and by exaggerated praise, not through. Okay, now let's read that again. Clare Boothe Luce, it's a weird name actually, Clare Boothe Luce, a journalist and politician, seems to have harsh words for her fellow journalists. She gives a controversial and condemning speech regarding the job of the press itself. Luce uses the introduction to her speech to prepare her audience for a seemingly critical message by repeatedly reminding them that she is there at their request, by employing a self-deprecating tone, by appealing to their ethos of becoming journalists in the first place, and by exaggerated praise for what the U.S. press is capable of doing when the job is well done. Granted, that's a lengthy sentence, but I think it's okay. I like my sentence. There we go. So the first thing I talk about here is repetition. She mentions twice, and I would quote this, so I'm just doing a quick outline. So let's point out, actually, in the piece, she says, I'm less happy that you might think, and more challenged than you could know. And then she says, you have asked me to tell you what's wrong with you. And then she says, an infinite perils to the rock thrower. So she compares herself to throwing rocks at them for what they are doing. The banquet speaker who criticizes, and then right here, even at their invitation. And then in the third paragraph, she says, you asked for it. I am not a volunteer. So she's mentions twice in paragraph 1, and I would use the quotes once in paragraph 2. Also, that involved the rock thrower. Maybe that was in paragraph 1. And once at the end of paragraph 3. You asked me to speak to you. I'm doing what you've asked. In other words, like, if you can't take it, why did you ask me here in the first place? Is kind of what she's getting at. And that's why I think the self-deprecating tone is important as well. I'm glad I added that. So self-deprecating tone. Says she won't give the type of speech that Billy Graham, or who is the other one? I can't remember. Bishop Sheen. Puts herself down a bit. Doesn't put herself on a pedestal. I'm a journalist like you, except not as great as you are. I think that's important because for the audience, it allows them to see that she's flawed, or at least she's saying she's flawed. So they are more ready to listen. Imagine if she had come in with kind of a high and mighty tone. That would immediately shut off the audience. They would not be willing to listen to anything she has to say, because it would be like, okay, lady who thinks she knows so much. And that's just human nature for us to want to kind of turn off when it seems like someone's talking down to us. So she and it's self-deprecating is kind of like a humble tone, you know. She's coming in saying, hey, I'm not the best. What do I know? I'm just here to speak because you asked me to. Instead of saying, you asked for this, and so I'm going to give it to you because I'm pretty amazing at my job and I know exactly what I'm doing. Okay. So the ethos, which is ethical persuasion. She's a journalist. She knows how tough the job is. And I would point out examples, particularly in this paragraph, starting on line 26. What is good journalism all about? And she goes to talk about the various things that journalism is about. And then she reminds them, no audience knows better than an audience of journalists that the pursuit of truth and the articulation of it is the most delicate, hazardous, exacting, and inexact of tasks. So she flat out says, yeah, I know how it is. It's inexact. You do the best you can. You try to, and she says, try to tell the truth as he sees it about his subject. Where does she say? Oh, it is right here. Sorry. The line 39. It is, to use the big word, the pursuit of and the effort to state the truth. And then at the very end, I think what she says at the very end is really powerful as well. The plain fact is that the U.S. daily press today is not inspiringly good. It's just far and away the best press in the world. So she knows the difficulties of the job, the struggle to get at the truth, and she's been there. She understands. Okay, and I would use examples from, because it says specific, make sure you're using specific examples. So from lines 26 through, I would say, I don't know, about 49. Lines 26 through 49-ish. Okay, and then she exaggerates praise upon them. And this is true in that last paragraph especially. It's a bit funny because she does say, you know, I'm not going to butter you up. She mentions that. right here in the paragraph that starts on line 18. You're an audience of journalists. There is no audience anywhere who should be more bored, indeed more revolted, by a speaker who tried to fawn it on, butter it up, exaggerate its virtues, play down its faults, and who would more quickly see through any attempt to do so. Okay, so she's like, I'm not here to butter you up, except notice what she does. She says this in that, I think it's the third paragraph. You saw, I just referred to it in the text itself. Then she goes about buttering them up, especially far and away the best press in the world. So, you know, she's basically saying, you know, regardless of the criticism, so then I would maybe conclude, regardless of the criticism you're about to hear, you do a fine job of getting to the truth, but you can do better. So she kind of gets them in the palm of her hand by saying, okay, you asked for this. You asked me here. I'm here by your invitation, not because I said, hey, you know what I want to do? I want to go speak to a bunch of reporters. She's female. They're female. It's an all-women's press club that she's speaking to. She's one of them. She's done the job. She understands the ins and outs of it. She knows that what they're asked to do day in and day out is not simple. It is not easy. So if you look, you know, the fact that she reminds them again and again, hey, you asked me to speak to you. Then she comes in a humble way, like, I'm not probably the best person to deliver this message, because, you know, I'm not good at throwing rocks at you, as it were. And then she does remind them, you know, I know how tough this job is. And then she praises them, you know, praises them before. It's kind of like, you know, you say something really nice before you have something really terrible to say, like, oh, you look so nice today. And then you have to say, by the way, I don't have the $20 that I borrowed. That was a terrible example. Let's pretend like that didn't happen. I could actually edit that out, but I'm not gonna leave it there. So hopefully this helped you in walking through this particular prompt and how I would approach it if I were given this to write about. Okay? I will talk to you in the Zoom meeting tomorrow and see if these things have been helpful and how else I can better assist you in figuring all of this out, because really, you got this. Thanks, guys.